Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to Comic Book Nostalgia. I'm CB Nostalgia, and I thought we could talk a little bit about Kamala Khan's powers. Hey guys, before we dive into this, I just wanted to let you know we are going to talk a lot of spoilers for Ms. Marvel Episode 3. So if you haven't seen it yet, I really do recommend you click away, watch the episode, and then come back. I don't want to spoil it for you. Well, we got the latest episode of Ms. Marvel, and it was revealed that the source of Ms. Marvel's power is indeed not her inhuman genetics. But there are some really interesting parallels to the comics and tie-ins to the Marvel Universe that weren't very clear before. Now, it's been pretty apparent to many of us that her powers in the MCU won't be inhuman, and they've been drastically altered. But this week, we found out exactly how the bangle ties into her history, where it came from, and how it could be affecting the story. At the end of the last episode, we met Cameron's mother, Najma, and Kamala actually learns that in the 1940s, she was friends with her great-grandmother, Aisha, and they discovered the bangle together. Actually, it's pretty clear there were a pair of bangles, and more interestingly, they were found on a person who had a blue arm. Now, if you're a fan of Marvel stuff, you know blue skin means the Kree, and we speculated for a while that these bands could be the Nega or the Quantum bands from the Marvel comics. And as we find out more and more, I actually think that is the case. One of the biggest reveals this week is that Najma, Cameron's mom, is actually part of the group known as ClanDestines. Now in the comics, they're actually known as ClanDestine and are quite different than this, but have very similar parallels. If you're unfamiliar with them in the comics, they actually made their first appearance in Marvel Comics Presents number 158 back in 1994, but the comic book versions are quite different. The story effectively revolves around a man named Adam who fell in love with a Djinn, and their children are this group known as the ClanDestines. Now this ties deep into Marvel history, going all the way back to 1168 AD. So I don't actually think they're going to use this in the series, but it does give you an idea of how deep some of these characters go in their mystical lore. Now, as we found out in this week's episode, Najma and ClanDestines want the bangle to return to their dimension. They are actually trapped in our dimension and originally from a place known as the Noor Dimension. Given the expansion of other dimensions in Shang-Chi, this really does kind of work for this mythology, and I do like the direction they're going. Now, they're looking for the bangle to open this doorway home, but as we found out in the episode, that could have disastrous consequences for the people of Earth. Kamala is a hero at heart, so obviously she needs a little bit of time to think about it, but sensing her reluctance, ClanDestine moves in, reveals their villainous intent, and attacks her at her brother's wedding. Now eventually, Damage Control shows up and apprehends him, leaving Kamala fleeing to find her way home. Now, we did find out a couple of interesting details from this whole episode revealing Kamala's powers. They did kind of make it pretty clear that the bands actually unlock some innate power in Kamala. And it very well might be that she is indeed also a Djinn. Now, the bands themselves, I'm going to say once again, I think they're the Quantum bands. The Quantum bands have been known to open portals and rip holes in time-space, so I could totally see how they could potentially open a portal to the Noor Dimension and help these Djinn get back home. Now, the key to the whole story, though, is where is the other bangle? And I suspect in the final 3 episodes, we'll find out more about this particular detail. The Quantum bands in the comics have this long history that we've talked about many times, and after this week's clues, I feel more and more sure that's the direction we're going here. Now, the little nod to them unlocking some innate power in Kamala could be some other detail like her inhuman heritage, but I don't think Marvel Studios is going in that direction, and the cultural deep dive that this show is does work pretty good with the fact that they're using the Djinn as villains and tying that all into Kamala's story. Obviously, having Kamala descend from Djinn and the bangles activating her Noor power is a massive departure from the comics, and I think the bands will be used to tie her to the Marvels, but it's pretty clear now that she's not going to be inhuman and not activated by the Terrigen Mist. But to be fair, that is a very similar activation process, so it does kind of keep true with the character. Now, obviously, when we get a little more about Ms. Marvel's powers in the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about it. I don't think fans should be surprised, to be quite honest with you. It's been clear for a while they're departing from the comic book version a good bit, and they really did need to power her up some to have her stand side by side with characters like Captain Marvel and Photon, both of which are pretty uber powerful in the MCU. Now, obviously, we're going to follow the Djinn nature and the Noor power pretty closely, but until we find out more, I gotta know what you guys think. How do you feel about Kamala Khan's powers being revealed and tied to a potential Noor heritage that she has from her family? And do you now believe these really are the quantum bands, given the blue-skinned person that had the bands on when they originally found them? Tell me what you think in the comments below. If you like this video, make sure you hit like, click subscribe, and if you don't ring that bell, you're not getting any updates. Peace.